Okay, staff, are we ready? IT, we're good to go? All right, we're going to get going here. Ben's not coming. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. Thank you for coming out tonight, even if it's just to enjoy the air conditioning. Let's see. Madam Clerk, could you please call roll?
Commissioner Dietrich is absent. Commissioner Long. Here. Commissioner Madrid.
Here.
Vice Chair Thomas.
Here.
Chair Ledoux.
And I'm here as well. Thank you. Mr. Thomas, do you want to lead us on tonight's
Sure.
flag salute? Thank you.
Ready, begin.
Thank you, Chris. All right. No presentations tonight. We'll need approval of. Are there any modifications to tonight's agenda?
None from staff.
Okay. We'll need approval for tonight's agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is public comments for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Do we have any comments for items that are not on tonight's agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay. Next, we'll need approval of last minute's meetings. Can I get the Planning Commission's approval for the July 12th, 2023 minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. Item 8, consent calendar, nothing on the consent calendar. Item number 9, public hearing items. This is item 9.2. Could the Deputy Community Development Director please introduce this item?
Sure, good evening, thank you. The following item will be presented by Associate Planner Brandon Cleary.
Thank you, Orlando. Good evening, Chair Ledoux and Commissioners. The project before you is PLN 21-0361, tentative track map number 37450, Garbani South. The project is located on the southwest corner of Garbani Road and Sherman Road. The applicant proposes to subdivide 10.27 acres into a community of 33 detached single-family lots at a density of 3.87 dwelling units per acre. Lot sizes range from 7,200 square feet to a little bit over 11,000 square feet. All the lots will meet or exceed the development standards in the zoning code. In addition, there will be a open space lot in the southwest corner of the project that has a mixture of natural open space and irrigated landscaping, in addition to a water quality basin in the northeast corner of the project. The general plan for these two properties are 2.1 to 5 residential dwelling units per acre and rural residential 5-acre minimum. The rural residential zoned area is designated to the lower left-hand corner of the project site. For the zoning, it is low density residential -2, which is a minimum 7,200 square foot lots, and rural residential 5-acre minimum. To the north, we have similarly zoned LDR2 zoned properties. To the west and south, we have a mixture of LDR2 and rural residential 5-acre minimum. And then to the east, we have EDC zone, economic development corridor. Access to the site will be given from Sherman Road on the east side of the project. There'll be 2 entrances and exits for full access. And then due to fire and city requirements for secondary access, there will be an emergency only access little corridor between lots 4 and 5 on the north side of the project for access to Garbani Road. The tract is within a high fire area, which requires a fuel modification report to be completed. This report dictated that the tract has to go through upgraded construction materials, restrictions on types of plant materials and locations on the properties, rear yard HOA maintained irrigation, and a block wall around the perimeter of the project. Total, there'll be over 90,000 square feet of landscaping. An initial study mitigative negative declaration was prepared with a public review period from June 15th through July 5th. And no public comments have been received. The recommendation is to adopt a resolution adopting the initial study and mitigative negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and adopt a resolution approving PLN 21-0361, tentative track map number 37450, subject to the conditions of approval and findings in the staff reports and resolutions. And that concludes staff's presentation. We are available for questions, along with the applicant.
All right, great. Thanks, Brandon. Great presentation. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions of staff at this time?
Can we go back to the map, vegetation map? I have a question about the open space section. Yeah, is this open space open to the public, accessible from the outside as well as the inside?
It is not. It is mainly there to preserve the rural nature of that corner of the property and to assist with the fuel modification requirements. So it's on a slope itself, so it'll only have access to the homeowners association for maintenance purposes.
I believe it's going to be landscaped, right?
Portion of it will be irrigated landscaping, and then the lower left-hand corner of it will be natural open space.
With 2 rows of shade trees, is that correct?
There will be some trees in there for 2 rows, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. It is 6:07. Madam Clerk, was this hearing legally noticed?
Yes, it was.
Okay, great, thank you. And was any correspondence received?
The correspondence received was referenced in the presentation.
Okay, thank you. I think the presentation said there wasn't any correspondence. Right, okay, thank you. Okay, do we have the applicant here?
Yes.
Can you join us at the podium and state your name, please?
Hi, Jordan Birch on behalf of the applicant.
Jordan. Let's see.
Good.
First things first, do you agree to all of the conditions of approval that you've discussed with staff?
I do, and I'd also just like to thank staff. I think they were great working on this project, and I just commend them. I think you guys have a great team here.
I agree. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for saying that. Commissioners, do we have questions of the applicant? Oh, pretty cut and dried, I think. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this agenda item?
No, there are no requests to speak.
Okay. Jordan, that was easy, right?
I
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good. So we've had at least a minute pass by, so we can close the public hearing at 6:09. This is our time, Commissioners, to have any discussion amongst ourselves if we need to. Anybody would like to speak or say anything about this project?
It's pretty straightforward. I'm glad that they're large lots. I like that. They didn't try and cram a bunch of little houses in there, so that's good. It's pretty basic.
I agree.
I totally agree with your with the Vice Chair, Commissioner. Yes.
Randy?
Yeah, I like the size of lots, the number for 10 acres. I like the points of access. I think it was well planned, and look forward to that
Okay.
in the city.
I'm glad they put 2 driveways and didn't try and just do 1.
Yeah. Yeah, like the horseshoe access, and I think the whole design is real good. Good. Okay. So there are 2 resolutions for adoption. We'll need a motion and a second to adopt the resolutions per staff recommendations. I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Not me.
Shall we do a voice vote?
Yes, please. I'm having
Okay.
some technical
Go ahead.
difficulty. Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Madrid,
Aye.
Vice Chair Thomas,
Yes.
and Chair Ledoux.
Yes. And that's for both, that was for both resolutions.
That motion
Okay.
passes.
Well, that was easy, right? Did you think it was going to go that easy or no? I think it's a clean project. You met with the staff, you came up with all the conditions of approval. Everyone's happy, so pretty straightforward. Thank you. All right, if you want to stay and enjoy the air conditioning, great. If you want to leave, I'll give you guys a minute to exit before we get to our next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Okay, item number 10 on our agenda is a discussion item. We won't be doing any voting tonight. This is just a workshop that we're going to be discussing. We have an applicant here, we have the commission, we have some members of the community. Thank you. If you guys would like to speak, make sure that you fill out a slip. I think it's at the back, right? Or with the clerk, and so we can get you officially up to the podium. Again, we're just going to do discussion items, no voting on anything tonight. Before we get started, though, I need to ask if any of the commissioners have met with the applicant. This would be the time to address that.
I did meet with the applicant today.
Yes.
Randy did too. Okay, thank you. Good. All right. All right, item 10.1, could the deputy director please introduce this item?
Sure, thank you. The following item, I'll be pinch hitting for the planner. He's in a well-deserved vacation, so my batting average is not as good as his, but I'll give it a try, okay? I'll start with providing a little bit of background. And okay, obviously, this is not the first time you're seeing this presentation. We have a condensed version of the original presentation that we gave the commission a few months back. Also, we're going to have a presentation that's going to be done by the applicant as well. So there may be some overlap between our presentation and their presentation as well. There's obviously a lot of background, and some of that background was presented the first time. And when the information we shared the first time, it was before the Planning Commission. So the project, as you know it, it was originally approved in the county back in 2007. It did require a zone change and a general plan amendment, and obviously the tentative map. I'll provide more specifics in the following slides as well. Back in 2021, we had an application submitted to modify a portion of the tentative map, what we're calling phase 4. So the project is broken into 4 different phases. Phase 4 is the one that's for consideration. It's still the same area that we're talking about today, the same area that was discussed back at the Planning Commission meeting. The item obviously went through a project review process with staff, multiple iterations of the map. We even moved the park throughout the process, and eventually we got to a point where it was presented to Planning Commission. That was back in February of this year. And at that meeting, we got some input from the residents, obviously various discussions with Planning Commission. And the commission at that point recommended that the city council deny the zone change and the revision to the tentative map. The project was then forwarded to the city council. That was back in June. Additional discussion occurred at that meeting as well. And the council at that meeting decided to bring back the item and legally it's called remanded the item back to the Planning Commission. And obviously, we decided to do a workshop, so basically give the commission an opportunity to voice some of the concerns. And I'll guide you through the presentation as far as what we've heard, what we've learned over the meetings that we've had on this project. So I'll continue. And obviously, the purpose for today is for the commission to provide feedback to the applicant, right? But what we did is we went back to the minutes and review the previous planning commission meeting, the city council. And basically what it boils down to is that there's 4 key issues that were consistently brought up. And those issues were also made part of the public record when the commission made the findings to recommend denial for the project. And basically, there's 4 items. They're listed here. One, it's obviously the lot size that was
Can
proposed.
we clarify something?
Yes,
We were actually recommended denial of the additional lots, not of the project itself. right?
that's correct. And when I say the project, that's the modification of the map, not the entire project. And you're absolutely right, Commissioner. There is an existing valid entitlement that currently exists. Phase 1 through 3 still remains the same. There's no modifications to that. That still remains the same. The phase 4, it's still the area it's been requested to be modified, and that's the area that the commission recommended that the modification be denied, not the original approval, obviously, because that's still a valid entitlement. So. So some of the reasons was, again, the lot size, specifically the smaller lot size and the compatibility with the rural area or the rural nature of the neighborhood. With that, there was a lot of discussion on additional traffic that the additional units were going to bring to the area and the potential impacts to traffic to the various street segments and intersections. There was a lot of discussion as well on pedestrian safety, specifically related to the school and how the kids were going to get to school in a safe manner. There's infrastructure needs on some of those streets, and that was part of those discussions. And the last point was also the overall public benefits of the project. So basically, as we move forward with the workshop. Keep these 4 items in mind when you provide feedback to the applicant, and basically identify areas that you may think may be important for the applicant to know as to how they can revise the project or make modifications to the project that would alleviate some of the issues or concerns that were brought up throughout the process. Again, just for the benefit of the residents or people or the thousands of people watching on YouTube, in case they don't know the project, it's located south of Garbani, obviously on the west side of Han, east of Murrieta. You can see it's just on Wicker, north of Scott. It's the existing general plan designation, it's 2.125 units to the acre. There's a portion of the site, as you can see on the right north side of the image. It's R5. It's a rural designation, and that area it's still proposed to remain open space. So that hasn't changed. The footprint hasn't changed either. The zoning, as you see it here on the slide, it's PD05. That's a very unique type of zoning, and what this is, it was a density that the city did not have, and in order to basically apply a specific zoning for that development, the city created this specific zoning for it. I do want to state for the record that obviously the original project, when it went before the county, this area was zoned rural zoning. It had an agricultural zoning, and it had a minimum, designation of lot size of either 1 acre, 5 acre, or 10 acres, because obviously it covers a big area, right? So, and when that zone change took place at the county, it was zoned to more a traditional single-family residential, but for us, we had to change it to comply with what we had in our general plan. Okay, so this is essentially what the county approved back in 2007. Again, 205 acres. Total number of units, 474. There are 3 different park sites throughout the development that equals about a little bit over 7 acres. And again, the open space acreage, it's 49 acres. It will remain the same as well. As previously indicated, there's 4 phases to the project. Phase 1, 2, and 3 will continue to be the same. Phase 4, which is on the right side, that's the project area right now, and the phase 4 is the one that's been requested to be modified. Obviously, as the project develops over time, there's going to be different improvements that will be required as part of those phases, and those improvements are listed as part of the conditions of approval. Okay, the proposed project, this is a site plan that illustrates some of the changes. One, the park being relocated more centrally to the overall project. Again, the lot size, it's requested to be reduced from what the county approved at a minimum of 6,000 to 3,780, which is the minimum. Obviously, there's also a request to decrease some of the setbacks to accommodate the smaller lot size as well. The existing park that was originally approved was 1.4 acres. The park that's currently proposed with the amended project is 3.2. Obviously, that's an additional 1.8 acres. But also, it's proposing a private rec area specific to phase 4 residents only that will have a rec building, a pool, and some other amenities as well. Again, the footprint of this area remains the same as previously presented to the commission and as the way it was approved by the county as well. Again, just to reiterate, the county approved 6,000 minimum, and what was currently proposed is 3,780 on the revised map. I do want to highlight a couple of additional items that the applicant has proposed. One of them, at least, you have already seen as part of the project that was presented before the Planning Commission, which is bullet point number 2, which is obviously the bigger park and the rec center that was part of the original modification. The other items are items that have been added to the project either before it went to City Council or even after the City Council meeting in an effort to provide additional community benefits. The first bullet, it's a half-mile trail loop that's being proposed in phase 1 to 3. There's an existing area that would accommodate this loop, which will have, and I'll let the applicant further explain that they have a more detailed presentation that's going to further detail these changes as well. But I did want to make sure I highlighted to let the commission know that this is something new that you haven't seen before. The third bullet point is they added an equestrian rest area with a hitching post at the park that was not originally contemplated. They're going to be adding additional language in the CCNRs to basically state that this is, a rural character neighborhood, and that the trail will be utilized by horses, and just so new residents know the nature of the area. Additional signage as well around the park and around the neighborhood. One other benefit is that the applicant, there's a mitigation that requires the applicant to provide the traffic signal on Wickard and Hahn. And the original traffic study mandates that to be done at the 275 building permit. Obviously, there's a need to have this improvement done, obviously, rather sooner than later, and the applicant is proposing to get it done at the 138th permit. And also put in a restriction that no development will occur in the open space, the 45 acres open space. Okay, so obviously the item was remanded back by the city council. What does that mean? That means that the applicant needs to, provide either various options for the planning commission to consider, or at minimum revise the project. And the planning commission will have the ability to consider those revisions and provide a recommendation to the city council, and whether you agree that those revisions mitigate some of those 4 areas of concern that I highlighted in my presentation. And then basically it goes back for city council, either on your recommendation for approval or denial. So today the applicant has a presentation that they're going to make to the commission. We haven't seen any revisions at this point, so I think the applicant wants to get feedback from the commission and see what items they would need to further analyze or modify, and that'll be part of the discussion tonight. So again, same thing, just looking for feedback from the planning commission. At this point, the chair and the commission can either ask questions of staff, or if the commission wants, we can have the full presentation by the applicant as well, and then maybe follow up with questions after that. It's up to the commission how you want us to proceed.
Okay, thank you. I did want to ask a quick question, just clarification. With the smaller lot sizes and the additional homes, they're still within the density range for this zoning, right?
That is correct.
Okay. The only change really is the minimum lot size. They're requesting to go below what our minimum lot size is. But even if it were approved, they would still be within the density range that's set in our zoning code. I just want to clarify that first. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions of staff before we talk to the applicant and see their presentation? Or do we just want to jump right to that?
In the presentation, I have a couple technical questions for staff.
Okay. You okay with that, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Do you want to join us up at the podium and just give us your name so we can have that fresh in our mind, and then we'll go from there.
And if we can have IT help us out, pull up the presentation. There you go. Thank you.
So the big arrow is forward and the little arrow is backwards? All right. Okay. You think I would know, but my name's Terry Galloway. First of all, I'd like to thank Orlando for his presentation. Great pinch hitter. Good job. I attended the Planning Commission hearing. I listened. I did not speak. To introduce myself, I'm the planning consultant that is working on behalf of this project with Richland. I'm here to provide the first half of our presentation, and then Brian, who is Richland, is going to give the second half of the presentation. We also have brought our traffic engineer to help answer with those hard questions that we don't know about. So as I said, I'm a planner. As Orlando explained, we submitted this application in May of 2021 with the staff. We've worked on it quite a long period of time before we brought it to Planning Commission. When we brought it to Planning Commission, we had a staff supporting the project, identifying no general plan amendment. The staff report included that there were no additional impacts created by the additional lots that we requested. And the staff told my client that we didn't need to present the project. I've been doing this a long time. Only 5 people showed up to oppose the project, and I thought it looked pretty good. I should have known better. As you know, we left with a 0-5 denial. So tonight I'm here to say what I think should have been presented to you for better consideration. That's item one. Item two is I'm going to identify the things that we've done after we got the 0-5 denial to try to work towards a project approval, and the things that we've learned from talking to the planning commissioners and the city council members that we've had an opportunity to speak to. But most importantly, we're here to listen and hear what you guys have to say, because we weren't expecting a 0-5 denial, and we'd like to show when we come back, we're going to come back to you with our best attempt to try to change your mind. So this is where we're going to start, and I'm going to try to be brief because many of you have heard this before. So the comparison of the project and why we're here tonight. In 2017, we got 474 lots approved with the project. In Planning Area 4, it had a very small internal HOA park. All of the homes were roughly in the high 600,000 to low 700,000s. The problem with that project, and the reason we haven't come forward with all the improvements that and the benefits that I think we bring for 16 years, is builders like to sell 4 to 5 homes a month. That's what they can deliver, so they try to sell that. If the demand is more than 5 homes a month, they raise the prices. So optimistically selling 5 homes a month to burn through 474 lots, it takes almost 8 years. We know the cycle of development, and that's a risk that our builders just have not been interested in for 16 years, and none of the roadway improvements and none of the signals that this project contributes to have been put in. And the residents expressed a big concern about that, and we listened to that. Our attempt here to provide a solution to that was to provide 2 different market segments. We obviously want those market segments to be more affordable. We'd like to be able to deliver homes in the 500,000 range to provide what we call the missing middle. And we figure by adding 2 more product lines, especially if they come in at the latter end of the project when the improvements, which are really front-loaded, all the major backbone street improvements, infrastructure is front-loaded, now you can burn through 12 homes a month, and if you do that, the construction cycle of the project goes from 8 years down to a little under 4 years. That makes a project that we can sell. So we came here with an attempt to fix the project that is stagnated, hasn't been developed for 16 years, and has been burdened with additional costs over time, carrying costs, been very patient holding it, and we have a $6 million commitment on our fair share cost of a water tank site, and actually 2 water tank sites and the construction of a water tank that has driven us to the request to come back and ask for more lots. In doing that, I'm a site planner, so I addressed all these things from a physical design standpoint. Let me make sure I didn't skip a slide there. From a standpoint, just to summarize, Orlando went through this. From a general plan standpoint, staff said we're consistent with the general plan. We have 2 zonings, rural residential, of which we are allowed 9 lots, and the special zoning, which Orlando did a pretty good job of explaining why we have this special zoning. I think a simple way I would explain it is the city had to interpret the county's approved development standards to match the city's development standards, so we created a text application over this parcel to establish minimum lot size and development standards, and that's really the purpose of our zone change. That's what we're changing. We're not changing the development area, but per the general plan, we're allowed 576 lots. We're proposing 571 lots, so we're consistent with that. We're consistent with the underlining zoning, and like I said, the purpose of our zone change really relates to, we designed a product, we applied the setbacks and put it on a lot. That lot was less than 6,000 square feet. It was actually 42 by 90, which is 3,780 square feet, and so that was our proposal. Couple kind of views of the project in terms of its compatibility. This is kind of looking northwest. You can see across the top part of the photo, and I don't have a pointer, but you can see the 215 freeway running across the background, and we're looking towards kind of the 215 in the enterprise zone. You can see coming kind of serpentine through the site is Wickard Road, and on the far left, you can see where it kind of ends at Evans Road and connects off the picture to the left to the middle school. Looking back the other way, kind of in a northerly northwest direction, you can kind of see basically the entire city of Menifee. You can see the encroaching development from the Kaufman and Broad project and the Woodside project to the north, and which basically touch our northeast and northwest property boundary. And you can kind of see how our project transitions to the lower density uses in the foreground, and you can also see how it provides a major connection through the site. This photo is something that we started with. I kind of have to apologize because these are the 5 people whose addresses labeled that showed up at the Planning Commission. We wanted to identify where they were so that we could reach them. We put that on a slide. Probably should have removed that. We're not trying to out these people, but these are the people who are most interested in your community, and we identified where we lived. I will take that off for the next presentation, but what we want to identify is the little X. That's the closest residence to us, and I have a section I'll show later on that kind of shows the land use suitability in terms of the compatibility besides the general plan of how the relationship of our project to the surrounding land uses. We chose planning area 4, not just because it was phase 4, to use this density play to get the additional units, but also because when you look at the site plan, it's got undisturbed natural open space proposed by the project. That's actually zoned for 9 units. Our proposed, to just clarify another thing that Orlando said, we're not proposing to dedicate 42 acres of open space. We're proposing to deed restrict that zoning, which has the entitlement for 9 units, to not allow 9 units and only to allow public improvements such as the water tank, which will go in there. But you can see in this land plan from the 5-acre lots to the north of us is where we put the larger lots, the 50 by 80s, and the smaller lots we put at the south end of Wickard, kind of at the connection headed towards the Hahn Wickard intersection that we'll talk about, and the enterprise zone close to the city. There was some kind of discussion at the Planning Commission that attempted to kind of analyze this project just as phase 4. And I think that's kind of not a proper way of as a planner to look at this project, because it's all one project. It's heavily front-loaded. We chose phase 4 because of its proximity and its location and its all the logical reasons to put the higher density units there. That doesn't mean that we didn't make changes back in phase 1, 2, and 3, and it doesn't mean that when we move up the traffic intersection signal from 275 to 138, that'll all happen well before phase 4 project comes online. So that affects phase 1, 2, and 3. And also, I don't know how to express this, but to say everybody benefits from a successful project. So if we have a project that staggers and lingers and is developed over 8 years, that only delays all the improvements. 138 comes up a lot further down the path than it would if we have a successful project that's well received in the marketplace. And so the project itself, when you look at it, provides 1.7 miles of community trails and meandering sidewalks. It provides about 0.8 of a mile of full traffic improvements, the first really paved roads in this area of town. We're increasing the size of the park. We're also increasing the accessibility to the park. We've increased some of the amenities in the park. By enlarging the park, we have an ability to provide practice soccer fields for the youth, which we've heard in the community is an important thing. Just in terms of comparing the park, you can see what's been added. We still have the tot lot. We've added to the tot lot a shade covering because of climate change. We've enlarged the grass area. One thing I'd like to point out is on the far left area of the park, you can see a little kind of oval-shaped area. That was added to the park after we worked with staff on getting these amenity packages approved. That is a connection to the equestrian trail that runs along the north side of Wickard into our site with a hitching post, watering station, and rest station for a horse stop. Honestly, we presented that at the first neighborhood meeting, and I expected Mr. Gruber to laugh me off the planet saying, go back, you don't know anything about horses. This is exactly what we're talking about, and what we're concerned about is you folks from the other world don't know anything about horses. It was actually pretty well received. I think Mr. Gruber said, I won't bring my horse there because some kid might feed it something, but I appreciate the gesture to make you aware that this is a park that benefits everybody who rides a horse and has accessibility to the trail network that you guys have master planned for the entire city of Menifee. And in addition to increasing the park size and all the amenities, we are also paying $185,000 into the in lieu park fees, Quimby fees. The first issue that came up at the Planning Commission from the public standpoint and was reiterated by the council was this is a rural area. This is a land use compatibility issue. I have to go on record as saying this project was approved by the county. I didn't know until I met the 5 people entering this room what a big issue that was, and I know they hate the project. I don't expect that they like me enough to change their mind. They're going to hate the project until they love the project. And that's not going to be tonight. I know that. I've worked with them. I've tried to be as transparent and open with trying to find solutions with them. But the project that was approved by another party that through the county that we bought and the city inherited and has had to do special zoning to get to work is a project that we understand nobody's going to like. Nobody's going to feel like they won at the end of this process. But we can try to listen to other people and try to basically be good neighbors and do the right thing. And that's what we've tried to do. So a couple of things I want to clarify is we're trying to provide housing that my client likes to use this analogy or this example. I don't. But if a planner in the city of Menifee is married to a teacher in the city of Menifee, they can afford to live in this community now. Wish it was an engineer and a teacher, but that's the analogy we have, and that's the idea behind this community, is that we can provide a live-in place where you can live, and this is important to me, in your house in 8,000 square foot lot, and your grandkids could live in the same community across the street. So we've agreed to deed restrict the open space for land use compatibility. We're consistent with the general plan. We've revised the public park to be more of a compatible public park, and we've made some other agreements that are in negotiations and early stages of trying to help the local traffic improvements and educate the public. All buyers will be disclosed that they're moving into a rural/equestrian neighborhood, and they should know what to expect in terms of odors, smells, noise, dust, whatever. And that is important because that follows the deed and stays on the land. In terms of land use compatibility, like I said, we're consistent with the general plan. We're well within the allowable density. The nature of our zone change is really a text change. In terms of physical compatibility, this is the section I told you through that little X house. We're 116 feet below that. We're over 1/8 of a mile. We're 800 feet away from the closest house to our closest house. The zoning has a built-in, and the topography has a built-in compatibility to it. And in all of our change, we're not changing the development area at all, just the number of units that you are 116 feet above. The other concern we heard about, and Orlando brought it up to on his Big Four, was traffic impacts. And this was addressed as their number one concern, not land use compatibility, the traffic impacts. Specifically, the traffic impacts at Evans and Garbani during school drop-off and school pickup. Yours truly went there and witnessed it, and then drove on Garbani, which is seems to be the shortcut of choice, up that dirt hill and back down that dirt hill. And that's got the neighbors upset. I don't blame them. It would get me upset. And we spent maybe maybe more time than we should have trying to resolve that issue, but we want to show the commitment that we want to try to find an acceptable solution for the city and the neighbors and us to close off that road to cut through traffic. And that's a work in progress, but we're committed to doing that. And we just had a meeting a few days ago with Nick where he proposed something that the city could support, and we're going to continue those studies until we come back to you. And maybe we'll have something better to report, but we're committed as long as we're vested in this project to do that. The larger traffic issue that really should have been the point of the Planning Commission's discussion is the traffic signal improvement that we're building at Wickard and Hahn. We were required by city staff to do an additional traffic study and our traffic engineers here that identified that without the project and the improvements that we provide in 2025, which isn't that far away, that intersection will function at level service F in the morning and the evening peak hours, essentially gridlock. With the project, and I don't know if we'll get there by 2025, but the sooner the better, with the project, that signal and the improvements of Wickard Road from Garbani Road all the way to the paved section at Hahn, that goes up to level service B, which is really good, in the morning, and level C, which is good, in the afternoon. So although the existing traffic, it was described as unbearable, and this current sentiment is more homes will just mean more traffic, the science of it and the real perspective I have of it is the project is not the traffic problem. The lack of the roadway improvements the project will provide for 16 years is the source of the current traffic frustration, at least in part. And our project is, although things will get worse before they get better, ultimately the very first step in providing connectivity, east-west connectivity across this area of town, and is solving that traffic problem, especially at that intersection. And Charlene, our traffic engineer, has a graphic she's going to share later that really shows why people are driving on the streets they're driving, because the streets we're proposing are not in yet. So just to highlight, the second slide shows the second two alternatives we've looked at to eliminate cut-through traffic through Garbani. There's been a lot of discussions about safety and turnarounds, and I know human behavior. And once you put a gate or a roadblock some way that people can't get through there, they're only going to do that once, and they're not going to do it every time to see if by chance the gate's open. It's a behavioral adjustment. So in terms of traffic benefits, and I believe this is my last slide, and then I'm going to turn this over to Brian. We're providing a 1/4 mile of paved improvements, that light blue section, to connect to the existing paving just west of Wickard and Hahn. We're extending that paved section. We're not doing the full right-of-way improvements that will be done when the adjacent land parcels, but we're providing that physical paved connection. We're providing 100% full right-of-way improvements and the trails and meandering sidewalks on both sides of the purple section of all the on-site improvements that connects up to the existing paved road at Garbani. There's a little short section of Wickard that's called Garbani before Garbani makes a hard turn and becomes the dirt road to the north. So we're making all of those traffic improvements, and we're also funding 16 other fair share improvements That's not a big number. That's only $217,000 in fair share improvements because our project doesn't actually impact a lot of other traffic signals. We're paying $6.5 million in school fees. The Wickard improvements on site are, weird thing about trying to remember numbers for the project, just about everything we do costs about $6 million. So we've got the tank is $6 million, Wickard Road is $6 million, the school fees are $6 million, you know, just whatever you want to do tonight, just don't add $6 million to the cost of the project. So anyway, with that, poor joke, I'm going to introduce Brian. He's the applicant on the project, and like I said, at the end, we're available to answer any questions, and also, like I said, traffic-related questions. We brought our traffic engineer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm Brian Hardy with Richland Communities. Good to see everyone again this evening, and thanks to staff and everyone for putting up with all of our multiple hearings and meetings and a year and a half of efforts on this project. So, but at any rate, I'm going to take it from here and try and keep it brief. The one thing I want to clarify too on Terry's portion is the zone text amendment that we are doing only applies to phase 4. It's not across the board for the entire project. It is limited only to phase 4. So that was purposeful because our intent is to keep all the larger lots, the 370 plus large lots over on the other side of Wickard, and to have a nice mix of product type. So at our last planning commission hearing, one of the things we heard was looking at the connectivity between our site and the school. We did take a hard look at that, and we did actually find that there are existing pavement connections that are working with the existing infrastructure that's out there, what's there in terms of right-of-way and what isn't. So there actually is, what you see in light blue is what we would be improving with our new fully improved Wickard Road sidewalk. The purple you see is an existing sidewalk that exists today that KB built along with their map. And then it crosses the road over to a sidewalk or through a crosswalk to another existing, I think that one's asphalt, and ultimately goes in and ties into the school. One of the things we've heard is potentially to look at how we can even better that situation, and there's a few different ways we're looking at this. There might be an even easier solution per Nick Fiddler, working with him, but ultimately trying to get an additional paved access that doesn't require as many crossings from one side of the street to the other. What we're showing here is what we're proposing as an additional condition to do a temporary asphalt sidewalk that ultimately goes over to the school, and then there'd be a crossing, a crosswalk over there. There was some concern by staff in terms of having a mid-block crossing, so that's something that would need to be discussed in terms of how we handle that from a safety perspective. We're also looking at trying to do that little segment between Evans and Wickard that's called Garbani, on doing a sidewalk on the south side. We don't own that property, and there may be some right-of-way issues there, but we're committing to do one of those two things to try and put in some sort of temporary asphalt. I do also know that there's been an application coming on the other side of Garbani there for a project. So hopefully all of this interim improvements will be replaced very soon by permanent. And that project's nothing to do with us. It's a separate applicant. So water infrastructure and concerns. So when I started working on this project, we had a plan of service in place that did not require a tank. We have an 18-inch line that goes in Wickard Road that is a major infrastructure piece. That's a major water line that goes into Wickard, and that still exists today. I'd say about 4 years ago, we were going through seriously trying to move this project forward with the market being in a better position. And as we did that with EMWD, we have a POS is called a plan of service. It's how you service your site from a major water infrastructure standpoint. So as we went through that process, we quickly found out that just doing that 18-inch line is no longer feasible, and there's pressure issues, there's capacity issues. Really the main issue is that there's only one tank that serves that entire pressure zone. It's about a mile away. If there are ever any issues with that tank, there's only one tank, there's no redundancy to it. So our project proposes a 2-pad site for 2 tanks. Our project needs about 700,000 gallons of the tank. We're building a 2 million gallon tank and then a pad for a future 2 million gallon tank. That is about a $6.5 million tag. Now there is some cost sharing with the MWD that we're working through on that, but the way that gets to work is we get to have the minority of the tank and pay for the majority of it. So we're kind of sitting right now, it is kind of in flux, but right now, if I had to guess where we are today, we're looking at paying for 56% of that tank. So about $3.5 million, I'd say, of additional costs to the project now. Even though they are sharing in a portion of that you still have to cash flow it, you still have to fund the construction, and then they get to pay for their minority portion once you're done, and they accept it. So there's a cash flow issues with sourcing the funds for that $6 million, and that tank gets built prior to occupying anything in phase 2. So they're acquiring the land from us, and they're paying that. Actually, we just said okay and agreed on an appraisal. They're paying $120,000 for that land, for that the tank will be on. So it's not it's a good deal for them. So other things, that tank serves the pressure zone that we're in is a very large pressure zone that also reaches over into the enterprise zone, closer to the freeway. The capacity there will feed all other future development in that zone, including the enterprise zone. So that is a major piece of infrastructure for future commercial developments in the area as well.
When you say enterprise zone, you mean the EDC between the freeway and
Correct.
this project?
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted to be
among
clear.
others, but that's one of the more critical pieces that, that there's some public benefit here of that tank will allow future capacity. Any enterprise or commercial project that were to go in there is not going to fund a tank like we are. They're going to wait until somebody else does it. You can kind of see in that little yellow square, actually, that's where the other tank is that exists today that serves the pressure zone that we're in. Just some other benefits Terry alluded to. We're paying, in addition to all the parks that we're building here, I mean, we kind of tend to get honed in on phase 4, but in reality, it is a greater project as a whole. So you can see the overall network of parks that we're building. We've got the main park over, and it's located in phase 1. It gets constructed with phase 2. That's actually the larger park, and has all sorts of amenities in there as well. It's HOA maintained, but publicly available. So it's a public park that would be maintained by the homeowners association. And then the other park that we've expanded is public. That one is a public park. And then we've also, you can kind of see that little green loop. That's where we talked about adding the half-mile running loop and some exercise stations. That's kind of something we were doing to offset some of the additional units as well. So we've added that. And then in between that, there's a drainage course out there that exists today. We avoid that, and that stays in place as open space. So that's kind of a natural amenity. And the running track goes around it, and then you got a series of areas to work out along that half-mile loop. Oh, this is kind of a blow-up of that and kind of the different exercises. So again, this amenity is because some of the lots are smaller in size, and they're not going to allow for a pool. The amenity is there for the homeowners association on those smaller lots over in phase 4. I'm going to bring up our traffic engineer. In fact, there's another exhibit, Orlando, that we sent that kind of shows some routes. But just to close while we're doing that, we've had a lot of things that's transpired since we've been here. We've had a lot of meetings with the public and phone calls, and we've had meetings with, everyone that'll meet with us and staff. So generally, we've kind of been cataloging everything that we've promised to do since the last hearing and what we've been going through. So we've been proposing about 10 conditions that kind of are over and above that go with phase 4 to kind of make sure that we walk the walk and do what we say we're going to do. We've got a lot of land in Menifee. This isn't our only project. This is one of our middle projects. We have a larger project over on the other side of the freeway and then a smaller one up in the northern part of the city. But generally what those conditions say, and we can go into more detail on them, but I'll summarize them before we turn it over to Charlene. Generally, it's to continue to work with the public and the neighbors to try and come up with a solution to close Garbani off. And we've looked at if there's nothing that comes out as a solution, the backup condition would be that we would put that in our public maintenance CFD and fund the city additional funds to maintain that road until it does get paved as a backup to.
You're talking about the dirt road going up.
Exactly, Garbani, yes. Yep. Correct. Yep. So that's one of the conditions, and you guys probably have it. You can read it in more detail. I don't want to bore everyone with the details. And then there's about 3 or 4 conditions talking about different disclosures about the park and the ability for equestrian use of the park, equestrian use of the trail, and things that come with equestrian use. What does that mean? And we're proposing to put these disclosures in our CC&Rs, so it's a legal document that is binding with the land in perpetuity. What does that do? It gives legal recourse to everyone, including our neighbors, to say, hey, we were here, you were disclosed on this, you've signed these CC&Rs, you understand that we're here, and that our rural lifestyle is expected. We've also added some discussion about that in terms of rural, the neighbors being rural. There's equestrian uses, what comes along with that. So a lot of disclosure in that, in the neighborhood of that. We've also agreed to try and do something in terms of the marketing of the project to be more of a rural feel, rural architecture and things like that, so that we've proposed a few different architectural styles that are more fitting and talked about a marketing name that would be more fitting with a rural equestrian lifestyle. Let's see, we've talked about deed restricting the rural residential that allows for 9 units, basically deed restrict it so it's open space and not rural residential and will never develop other than the water tank. The signal is currently provided at 275. As a part of this approval, we'd move that up in half to the 138th occupancy, and that's a condition that we would commit to.
Can you talk about that for a second?
Sure.
So I was just doing the math. If you're at 5 homes a month, it would, I calculated, take about 4.5 years to get that signal in at the 275 on Wickard and Hahn. If you moved it down to the 138, then that reduces it down to approximately 2 years or less. Is that correct?
Cuts in half, yeah.
Cuts in half. So I
Yeah.
just want to make sure I was doing the math right there.
Yeah, and there's also some requirements there that the actual geometrics in the lanes need to be in at the first occupancy. So a big chunk of that work's going to get done. The signal is just going to take some time. There's some complexity to it. There's right-of-way that needs to be acquired.
And while the signal may take 2 years, you're actually not all 138 homes are going to go in at once. I mean, what's the phasing realistically? How long would it take to build those? A year? I'm trying to compare.
What really, I mean, so there's a lot of variables. If we don't have phase 4 in there, it just depends. You know, right now we're looking at phase 1 and through 3 moving forward. Maybe you have 2 product lines in there, 2 builders going at one time. So you may have 2 builders selling at 5. More segmentation helps us to do that. You know, we kind of characterize those all as larger lots, but you do have 6,000s, you've got 7,000s, so you may have one builder building on the 6s and another on the 7s, but generally that's very, very close to one another. So we have to find 2 builders that are willing to build kind of in competition with one another to help absorb that. But also that impact is coming in slower. You know, they're dribbling in potentially.
That's my whole point is,
yeah.
is what is the impact?
Right.
What's the timing? If we say these numbers, but how long will it take before another car is sitting at that signal, right? Without the signal? That's really what matters.
Yeah. Right, and so that's cutting it in half from another 138. The geometrics and the lanes all would be in there prior to that. it's really, to me, you would probably start all that work from the day one of grading and building Wickard, but those signals take time, and you can't really time the market. Who knows? What you don't want to be in a situation is where you are doing really well and you are selling, and the signal's nowhere close to being done, and you've got to stop.
That's my whole point. Okay.
Yep.
So going back to, phase 4, how many years would you start to build phase 4?
So it depends. So phase 4, it depends on when that would start up. You may have that being towards the end of like a phase 3, and then that starts up. But that phase 4, with 2 product lines in there and a more attainable buyer profile of probably around the $150,000 household income, those could absorb at a little bit of a quicker pace. And they are a nice contrast to the large lot that we have 370 of.
But what phase of construction is?
That's phase 4 as of right now. Yeah.
Phase 4 is last anyway.
Yes. Yeah, and we have a phasing plan.
You can technically build phase 1 and 2 and then jump to 4 and then go back to 3.
It would require an revision or.
Point that out.
Yeah.
By improving the segmentation, we also improve the likelihood that phase 4 will be brought on earlier. But, Mr. Galloway, I'm sorry, can you?
Do you want to come up? Yeah, so what he's saying is you could theoretically, but all those improvements would have to be in, because that phase 4 requires all the improvements that precede it, like Wickard and the signal, or if it's triggered by then, to be in. So.
Yeah, what I wanted to explain is we have phase 1, 2, and 3 is 312 homes. 138th home, that signal goes in for construction.
Right.
After that signal goes in and Wickard Road is fully improved, phase 4 could start and be selling at the same time phase 3 is selling. Right. That's why we can shorten the time frame so much. And right now, in like Brian says, in phase 1, 2, and 3, we could have 2 builders. We do have, like Brian said, we have 60-foot wide lots, 65-foot wide lots, 70-foot wide lots. So 2 builders could go in there on 60 and 65s. The problem is there's a limit to how much house you can put on those lots because of how much people can afford to buy for a $700,000 home. So those houses are going to be segmented. They're going to be roughly the same size. One's going to have more curb appeal because it's wider, and that means that you're probably not going to hit 5 a month in both products. You're going to hit 3 a month in those products for a net total of 6. You get diverse products where you've got 40-foot wide, 50-foot wide, 60-foot wide, 70-foot wide, all at the same time. That's what makes our project a lot more attractive to our buyers. That's the whole logic behind us standing here having this discussion.
Yeah, and yet again, the warrant comes at the 275th, so we've moved it up significantly from when it's warranted.
Meaning the signal.
Correct. Yes. So I'm going to bring up Charlene Wangso with Urban Crossroads, and if you wouldn't mind, Orlando, to bring up the exhibit that I said I won't take very long before Charlene comes up. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm around for any questions. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, Charlene So with Urban Crossroads, the traffic consultant on the project. We wanted to bring up this slide and kind of highlight from a circulation perspective the benefit that this project brings. The Golden Meadows project, like Brian and Terry identified, is going to complete this portion of Wickard, which is an identified roadway on the city's general plan circulation element. So for the portion of the roadway that lies within the project boundary, they would be completing the ultimate roadway section and then would provide a paved section the rest of the way over to Hahn. This roadway, this new east-west roadway connection is shorter. It measures approximately 1.4 miles from Evans over to Hahn. Currently, to get to the same points from Evans over to Hahn at Wickard, roughly, we've kind of drawn out these other alternative routes that exist today. So you have what's identified as Route A, which basically goes to the west to Marietta, down to Scott, and then up Hahn. That's the longest route at roughly 3.7 miles. Route B uses an unpaved roadway route, basically, but it is a little bit shorter than that at 1.8 miles. And then you have this other Route C, which uses paved roadways to the north to come back south to Hahn and Wickard. And that route is about 2.7 miles. So you can see that the completion of this east-west roadway would significantly shorten the distance and the time to get from Evans over to Hahn along Wickard. Providing this east-west connection would not only improve access for emergency vehicles in the area, but as Terry and Brian alluded to earlier, could potentially alleviate some of the cut-through traffic that's occurring in some of the surrounding neighborhoods. I'm available if you guys have any other transportation-related questions.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I have a question. At the first planning commission meeting, one of the residents made a comment that they need the signal and they need to mitigate this traffic problem, but there's so many people moving in, more people, it's not going to make any difference. How do you answer that from the traffic standpoint?
Well, as Terry said earlier, as the area, not just this project, but other projects in the area, as the city starts to develop, traffic is going to increase over time. And that's why the traffic study that evaluated this intersection found that even for an opening year cumulative condition without this project, you're going to have a deficiency as traffic increases over time. What this project does is offer a solution to that in that they're going to install a traffic signal. And the condition previously was that that traffic signal needed to go in at the 275th dwelling unit, and now they've agreed to do it at an earlier time frame. And that time frame occurs way before they even get to their phase 4, where they're proposing these additional units.
So everyone can understand, once they get to the
138th dwelling unit.
they can't pull a building permit if they tried until the traffic signal's in. Now, how do you give the existing residents who've been living there and loving it for so long, how do you give them peace of mind to what, traffic-wise, which I guess you just did, so that was.
I mean, this roadway is going to provide important connectivity that's planned long range as part of the city's, that's contemplated as part of the city's general plan. You have them completing this roadway. This connection would also, I think, this portion of Wickard is identified as a Class 3 bike route. So by putting in this roadway, you're now offering that accessibility to bicyclists in the area. The roadway improvements include sidewalk, curb, and gutter, so you have pedestrian connectivity where you did not have that before. I think there's a lot of other benefits that this project is providing by completing this east-west connection.
How does your traffic compatible with horses?
In terms of,
that might be an out there question, but I mean, there's horses, they come first, right? I mean, that's how we.
Well, there's a dirt, DG trail all on Wickard, correct? Yeah, that connects it.
I'm just throwing out the obvious question.
yeah, they are accommodating trails and crossings like crosswalks and things like that would address or would serve bicyclists, pedestrians, people on horses, etc.
So you're saying this won't affect, this project won't affect the equestrians?
It should not in
That's what
terms
you're
of the
saying, traffic-wise.
connectivity.
Thanks, Randy. What I'd like to do is continue with questions from the commissioners of the applicant, and then after that session, then we'll get to the public speaking comment section where you guys can have a chance to bring up issues, and then we'll go from there. So we'll continue with questions of the applicant and anyone else who spoke.
Do you have any questions?
Yes. Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. I was not quite clear about the timetable for the traffic signal. I'm not quite sure about the construction starts for each phase. If you start construction for each phase sequentially, then for the first 3 phases, the rate of market absorption is going to be much lower. So we were using average, and if phase 4 doesn't start in time, you are not going to get a faster rate of absorption. So we are still using the 4-year timetable, not 2 years, unless phase 4 could start earlier concurrently with other phases. That's my main concern.
I think I understand your concern, and I was a little bit uncomfortable when that's why I brought up the absorption being somewhat reduced when we've got 2 products that are basically in the same segmentation. Probably isn't going to be 5 per product, it might be 6 cumulatively. So I think that's a good catch in terms of the conversation. And really, we don't know what the absorption is actually going to be, but kind of the mathematical way of looking at it is if we put that signal in at the 138th versus the 275th, that's roughly, I mean, that's exactly half. This traffic signal is going to come twice as quick as it would without the project being approved. So that may be 2 years sooner, that may be 30 months sooner, may be longer. If the timing cycle is that we have a 24-month recession in the middle of it, you got to, put that in there. But the whole point is it's very much beneficial to do it earlier rather than later, because the real deadline in terms of time that we're facing is that signal currently starts to fail scientifically through the study in 2025. So whether at 2025 we're on our 15th unit or our 135th unit, that's when that signal starts to fail. So the sooner we can...
The intersection.
The intersection, that's when that, intersection starts to fail. So the sooner we can get that intersection in, and as sooner we can make the connectivity to that intersection, which is kind of what drives the 138th number and not the 0 number. We got to get the road, we got to build a road to the intersection to have the intersection. We can do that, and we're committed to do that. If we can get the project through City Council, twice as soon as how do you say this? Twice as fast as we're obligated to do based on its need.
That's a good point for me to ask a clarifying question. This accelerated installation of the signal, you've agreed to that whether or not your reduced lot sizes are approved, or if they're denied again, just if, you're going to stick with the original plan on installation of the light.
That's correct. If we cannot get this project approved, then there's really no way we can afford to do the project signal earlier.
Understood. Thank you.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Another point that was not clear, for phase 4, it appears that the half of the project having an average lot size of 4,877, and then the second half, the smaller lot size with an average of 3,780. So you have the upper half different size and then a lower.
That's correct. We're proposing 2, and these are not average lot sizes. These are minimum lot sizes.
Oh.
Can we pull up that graphic that shows the proposed new?
We're proposing 2 essentially typical lot sizes. Right. One is 42 by 90. If you do the math on that, that's 3,780 square feet. We propose that in the southern area, closer to the freeway. In the northern area, I'm still waiting for that slide.
Terry, give me a minute so I can ask IT to please pull up staff's PowerPoint presentation.
Actually, it's the developer's presentation.
Oh, is it in the developers?
Anything
The green
close.
one. That's there.
Yeah, that's the developers.
By
So
having-
in the northern lots are 50 by 80. Those are 4,000 square foot minimum. We have plenty of lots in the 4,000 minimum that are larger than 4,000, and we have plenty of lots in the 3780s that are larger than 3780s. In fact, all of the lots along Wickard are already 4,000 minimums. That was negotiated by staff. Who's doing this? Not me.
It was one of the first, right there, right there, right there. So the orange ones are
The orange ones are the smaller ones, and the yellow ones are the
4,000 plus.
Are the 4,000s. I didn't want to say larger ones because somebody would not say that's probably not correct. But 4,000s and 3780s. I think we actually have a better slide that shows that one even closer up. But again, I don't know if I'm doing this or somebody else is. I think I'm going backwards. Okay. At my age, this is the big nightmare, that you get to the meeting and the,
Right there. Oh, you just passed.
Passed it.
there we go.
Right there, yes.
There, this is the best slide to show it. So the lighter colored slides that are around the park and closer to the rural residential 5-acre, the RR5 zone, we've put them on the north end of the site and buffered them with the natural open space, which we have agreed to further to deed restrict if we get this approved. And then to the south, closer to the Hahn-Wickard intersection, is where we're proposing the smaller lots, 38 by 70. And really, I know that's a weird number, and it's optically, it sounds really small, like a 32 waist on your Levi jeans, but really what that is it's a 42-foot wide lot. It's actually deeper than the larger lots, but it's 42-foot wide. And what makes that number kind of significant is if you have a 42-foot wide lot and you put a house on it and you have a 16-foot wide driveway, which is what you typically have with a 2-car garage, everyone can park their car in front of their house. There's room between the driveways at 42 feet. That's the magic number architecturally. So we didn't want to go to smaller lots than that because we know people park in front of their houses, and that helps sales, especially if you're looking at the senior buyer. And that's one of the potentials that we have in terms of the demographics we're trying to serve. I use the planner, teacher, younger people scenario, but also this is a great place for people that don't have to commute to downtown, that like to live in a lower intensity kind of environment, to have a retirement home. And that's one of the reasons the pool is implemented in there.
Comment, in order to accomplish that, you're reducing your setbacks. So basically, there's less space between the house and the fencing. So I think it was the rear and the sides, right?
The side setbacks are staying the same. The rear and the front are being
The
reduced.
rear and the front are reduced. Okay, so
Yes.
that's how you're getting a
The
big
rear
up-
and the front are reduced. The rear on, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Orlando, but I believe all along Wickard, the rear does have a minimum, a greater minimum, so it is not reduced from the other homes. But generally speaking, yes. We reduce the rear yard setback. Why? Because young working families and retirees don't want the big yard to maintain. They just want a patio area they can barbecue and live in, and they don't want the maintenance costs or the water costs of large yards. The reason why we reduce the front setback is architecturally, if you have a house that's on a 42-foot wide lot or on a 45-foot wide lot, that house is going to be 32 to 35 foot wide. The garage door remains the same on every house at 16 feet wide, so a smaller percentage of or a larger percentage of the front elevation is garage dominated on these smaller lots. Nobody buys a house because of a pretty garage door, so by keeping the 20-foot setback to the garage, but reducing in phase 4 the living space setback, we can bring the living space forward of the garage, which visually reduces the visual impact of the garage as you drive down the street because there's living space in front of it. So that setback, all of the setbacks are really an afterthought of, or a side effect, afterthought is not the right word, Terry, a side effect of designing the house and putting the lot around it and trying to be as efficient as possible so we can reach that $500,000 buyer profile. I'm out of breath. That was a traffic question.
It's a point of my concern. So for the bottom half of the project with a lower lot size, so I'm just guessing then street parking would be higher than the upper portion. So how do you take care of the parking situation for the lower half?
So no, what I just explained is by having the smallest lot width be 42 feet, that means that we can effectively park 2 cars in the garage. I know nobody does that, so let's not give 100% credence to 2 cars in the garage, but we got 2 car spaces in the 20-foot driveway, and then every house in the frontage that's remaining, the 42 feet minus the 16 feet, allows them 20 plus feet so they can park a car. When you go and expand that from 42 feet to 50 feet, that just gives you 8 more feet to park a car. Doesn't give you space to park 2 cars. So essentially the parking availability in theory in both neighborhoods is the same, and it equates to about 5 parking spaces per unit, counting the 2-car garage, the 2-car driveway, and the space on the street in front of it. And then there's, other situations site planning wise where you're on the side corner and there's no driveways and you've got 90 feet lots back to back, 180 feet of parking, which is about another 9 parking spaces. So in my head, I probably did the math wrong.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Chris, go ahead.
So questions and comments. I'll say a couple of things that my suggestions would be, and then I have some technical questions for staff on implementing those. First of all, something just came up. One of the benefits I see is my son went to Paloma. If anyone's tried to drive to Paloma High School in the morning, it's usually about an hour turnaround by the time you get done with traffic. This would be another southern entrance to get up there. It would relieve that. So I just wrote that down as a thought. But what I would like to see, when I look at these projects, first of all, everyone knows I don't like density. So increased density my first comment was no. If the net gain, that density is offset in a net positive way, there's some things we can do. I'll look at that. Some of the positive things that you could do that might get you there, that would be a benefit to offset and mitigate some of this density, would be number one, we talked about the rural feel of this, right? Just so everyone knows, I have pigs, goats, rabbits, chickens, and a horse. So I'm familiar with the urban stuff. Come over anytime. We would like to keep the rural feel along here, which means a little larger lot, the perception, right? And you're talking about the name and doing some rural design, things like that. If it could be penciled in that along Wickard, that S that goes through, that the parcels fronting Wickard, boost all those up to the 6,000, back up to the 6,000. So when you're driving along, it looks like a large estate rural place. Just a thought, you can consider
Understood.
that. The second thing would be to address, this is where staff will have to help, on Country Haven, there's obviously a concern of people cutting through there, and we talked about the traffic flow, people going through there. If there's any way logistically we could work on blocking that off for some period of time, I know there's public access rules on public highways, but maybe we can talk about that in a minute. During the construction phase until Wickard goes through and it relieves all that traffic. The third one would be, I have a large concern on the sidewalk at the northern, if we could go, can we go to the graphic that you had that you just pulled up for Joe? For IT? Okay, let's go to the one that shows the Garbani, the school site and the sidewalks. So I think that was in, I'm not sure whose presentation, right, a little farther.
A couple more right
Right
here.
there, right there. Back up, back up.
You know what I'm doing.
Lighter
Pushing
finger.
backwards on the
Okay, I
same
think
button.
IT's fighting you.
Lighter finger.
So, no,
No,
right
the
there, right
next
there,
one.
right there. But-
Next one, back one.
So,
One more. No, you're doing the same thing. You're trying to go
Wait.
back by
Okay.
pushing that. No, the That's a different button.
Other way.
It's not intuitive.
I'm not doing any better.
You're getting close.
Exactly.
We're almost there. One
There we
more.
are.
Stop, stop,
Okay,
stop, stop, stop.
Stop. Okay, so in reviewing this with staff and with, I talked to the developer, the big concern here is, once all these houses go in, a bunch of those kids are gonna be walking to this middle school. They technically could cross Wickard, and there's a northern, on the northern side of Garbani Wickard, there's a sidewalk, and then you would put it along the north side, then they cross. That's not as tenable. I would like to keep everyone on the southern side of Wickard Garbani, so they can, because that's what the kids are gonna do, whether you put it there or not. I used to walk to school, so I know what I did. And have a continuous sidewalk or AC pavement on the southern side of Garbani and Wickard all the way to the middle school. Now, my technical question for city staff is, I was told, and you can see it, there's a little drainage thing or something there in the corner there where the yellow arrow ends, and they don't own it, but where does the right-of-way, don't we have a 20-foot right-of-way after center line there that we could put a AC paved sidewalk there, regardless of ownership?
I think it actually shows better on this slide. You can see where our meandering sidewalk ends.
Yeah.
And you can see there's a temporary taper because only half of Garbani that's shown in brown is built. The south half has not been built because that, where the Garbani Road label is, that's a vacant piece of property. You can kind of see it on the
You're
left
not
side.
improving that frontage on the Garbani section to the west of your property,
No,
right?
we don't own that.
You don't own it, okay. So Nick and Orlando, is there enough right-of-way off the current center line to put a paved sidewalk to keep the kids on the southern side?
Vice Chair Thomas, unfortunately, our GIS isn't bringing up our right-of-way documentation, but I 100% agree with your analysis of having the students on the south side of the roadway. Adding another mid-block crosswalk in front of the school is going to be very challenging. It's already a stream of kids at the intersection of Evans and Garbani.
So Nick, I'm glad we have a chance to work this out because our engineer, obviously, we're proposing on the north side of the street 1,200 linear feet of asphalt, temporary asphalt sidewalk, and that ends and requires a mid-block crosswalk, which staff doesn't like, and we fully understand that. We don't really like it, but obviously if you don't have the connection to the sidewalk, kids are gonna run across the street there without, so we need the sidewalk to get that to work. If we can replace 1,200 linear feet of asphalt with 500 linear feet of asphalt on the south side, we'd certainly be willing to do that. Our engineer has told us that there's some technical issues why we can't. Cheryl and I spoke this morning, and she said they have some engineering input that they can do that. We've got some time before we're scheduled to come back to you, and that will be something we'll work on. We're committed to do one or the other, and we understand the difficulty with the north one. If it's easier to do the south, I think we're all in agreement that that's a better solution.
So if staff would study the right-of-way there, I would strongly encourage making that work. Obviously, if there's engineering things we can't, but if we could, that would be my suggestion. And then work with past staff, as far as the whole Country Glen and blocking it off for a while, what is the law as far as it's a public roadway and blocking it off for a temporary period? Can you do a emergency ordinance or variance or something?
So Country Haven has been dedicated, but it has not been accepted by the city. So it's not truly a public road at this point. It's been dedicated. I've worked with a couple of the homeowner or property owners in that area. It would require the homeowners in that area to produce a petition saying that they would be open to closing that section of roadway. Not only the people that front Country Haven, but the adjacent parcels that would use it on a route. But that could be overcome by putting in some sort of electronic gates or devices that those adjacent property owners have access to as well and can use it. So it would limit it to a finite amount of property owners.
And so if the city, it's been dedicated, but the city has not accepted it, legally it's still the property owners?
It's very much like a private
Okay.
private
road.
roadway in an HOA
So
community.
they have the legal power to do this then?
Yeah.
Property owners?
Yeah, we could work with them, but we would want to make sure that everybody's in agreement with the closure of that, because certain residents that are just adjacent to it have used this route for several years. We want to make sure that they still have the ability to enjoy using that route. There will be some requirements to make sure that there's proper access for safety, fire, Knox box or some
Squawk box thing?
yeah. There's adequate turnaround ability. If someone were to come down the street and find out they can't continue, that they'll be able to do a U-turn similar to like a cul-de-sac or a hammerhead, preferably like a cul-de-sac that would be easy for someone to maneuver outside of those gated areas. So if someone's coming in from Garbani from the south, there would have to be a little area for them to turn around and head back out without having to back down the whole road. And same thing on Mueller, there would have to be a little area that they could turn around and head back out.
So he had mentioned that they agreed to whether it's a CFD or a temporary mechanism or just a direct bill, whatever it is, that would fund those temporary fixtures to do that. Is that correct?
So what I was kind of saying, the way the condition kind of reads right now is the assumption would be if we can't come to a full design on this when we come forward to council or planning commission, that if there's nothing that is ultimately supported and that agreed upon by the neighbors, the fallback would be to fund the maintenance of the dirt road until the road paves by the project maintenance CFD. So that maintenance CFD is a city maintenance CFD that the project funds through the homeowner's tax bill. So they would fund some maintenance on that. So like we'll do our effective tax rate for the maintenance based on the basins being maintained and some of the slopes and all of the stuff that's maintained by the city CFD. So what we would say is we would elect to put that into the maintenance CFD as a backup to have the city maintain that to a higher level than it is currently maintained today through funds from our CFD.
Okay, go ahead.
Unfortunately, that wouldn't be feasible if the road hasn't been accepted by the city.
Well, we're talking about Garbani.
Oh, Garbani, not
Yep.
Country
Sorry.
Haven.
Yeah, I'm talking, okay.
That's a backup if we
I'll
aren't
tell you
able to
what,
work something
We'll
out.
let staff, you guys work
Yeah.
out the dirty details on this.
Yeah.
And, but the goal here is to be able to temporarily block off to mitigate the residents' concerns about that route being used by all these people. And that would only be until Wickard's done, because then Wickard would relieve all that traffic. So that's my thinking on it anyway. And then the other thing would be definitely to bring the traffic signal completion to the 138th building permit. The benefit I see to that is, when I look at these things again, I hate increased density, but if that traffic signal does come in at 138, I know that if I'm taking my kid to Paloma High School and that traffic signal's there, my life will be better. So that's just so everyone knows that's what the thinking is. So it's the traffic signal, it's the sidewalk on Garbani on the south side, it's some way of blocking Country Haven in some way or form, it's the 6,000 square foot parcels along Wickard, so we have the rural feel, the larger lot feel. And then the last one is, and I don't know what the cost is, but it would really make my heart happy, is a splash pad in the public park.
No problem.
Putting a splash pad somewhere in there. So I have not mentioned that to staff. I'm not sure what the feasibility, legal or not, is. I don't know, could you comment on that?
We can look into that because it would be a city park. There is a significant cost to replacing, let's say, the basketball hoops with a splash pad. A park of this size, a neighborhood park of 3 acres, we'd want to look at the feasibility of the appropriateness of it in that location, or perhaps there's a contribution made to doing a splash pad somewhere else relatively adjacent on a larger public facility, but we can look at that as an option.
However you'd want to work it out, they would be paying for some kind of splash pad improvement wherever. When I first suggested, I thought, I don't know if we want all the cars coming in there to a splash pad, so whatever you think planning thinks it should be, if they could contribute towards that, that would be a wonderful thing. So those are my questions. What did you say?
Not a $6 million splash.
No, I think it was 4.5 million, but whatever. So.
Thanks, Chris. Joe, did you have any questions?
Chair, if I may, before we continue, over here, thank you. Vice Chair, thank you for your questions and your suggestions, but I think it's more appropriate at this point to have clarifications from the Commission and questions from the Commission, and then at that point, I think our preference would be to invite the public to make their comments, and then after the public speaks, then we continue with the additional suggestions by the Commission.
Thank you, Orlando. Randy?
Yeah, I want to go back to the phasing and clarify that. So, you're the master builder, right? You're gonna sell off portions to merchant builders, right? So
One or more merchant builder, yes.
one or more. So you're gonna build all the backbone, and they build the local streets. So basically, everything could sell at the same time. Is for sale at the same time. They're gonna have their own schedule.
So you can't do anything in the project until Wickard's built, essentially. You can build about 100 homes without the tank. But yeah, so generally we would sell to, let's say phase 1 sold to Lennar. They would be obligated to construct Wickard Road. They'd be anything that's triggered for phase 1 and required per our phasing requirements, mainly Wickard, would be done by them. And then that really kind of sets the project up to move from there. Once Wickard is in, that's a lot of the heavy lifting. You move into phase 2. Now with assuming the 138th is the signal, that's kind of the next big trigger. Also, phase 2 is the tank. So phase 2 has some heavy lifting of its own. Then once you get beyond that, phase 2 also has the big park that's located in phase 1. It would be constructed in phase 2. So phase 2's got a lot of effort. So probably what is going to happen is you'll have a builder that comes in 1, maybe 2, and builds phase 1 through 3, and builds all that infrastructure, and everything will be in, and then tier off of that and install as the individual planning areas trigger the individual improvements.
Yeah, that'll be very efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I have one last question before we get to the residents. Could you explain why you went to the higher density lot?
Well, it was a confluence of things. We've talked about a few of them, but let's try and put it in a bow.
Talked about marketing.
Yeah, well, the really big part of it was this project, like Terry alluded to, has been sitting here for 16 years, and nobody's had Wickard and Hahn improved, or this road segment improved for the benefit of the public, and that's because this project has been broken from a financial perspective. The Lennars of the world don't go in to do this just for practice. They're already very good at building homes and doing land development. It's got to turn a profit at the end of the day, just like anyone else that has a business. They don't go through the effort of R&D on a project or something unless there's some sort of back end for potential for profit. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of challenges to this project from the perspective of the cost. So that was a challenge to begin with. Then the tank came in, added to that burden. And then Terry also talked about it. We have basically one product line out here, call it 1A, 1B, but it's all large lot, very expensive homes that only so many buyers can afford. We want to have a more dynamic buyer profile of more than just household incomes of 200 and 250,000. There's only so many people that make that kind of money. you want to have a wider buyer profile that can afford your product. And, you know, this product gets into an area of a household income around 150,000. This same product is selling just north of the city, just in the county. So, you know, not at the premium that the city of Menifee would bring, but they're selling in the mid to high fours, this same product, and it also has a single story. So that's very appealing to not just, you know, first-time home buyers that want to build equity and ultimately move on to the larger homes through the equity built in this conventional home, but also age qualified and people that want lower maintenance, either through the fact that maybe they're both working or they're retired. So.
But the more lots you have, the more you can distribute the cost.
Sure. Yes, exactly.
So
So that's, yes, that's the more, exactly.
So you need these lots, you calc them out to make this project count,
Yeah.
pencil, right?
Yes, and that's a major factor, obviously,
Well, yeah,
yes.
it's normal. But
Yeah.
hey,
And that's why we're able to do, even though, you know, the project hasn't moved forward before, you know, we add these lots, there's some flexibility to do some of these things, like move the signal up. There's a cost to do that. The more you front load the infrastructure, the more difficult the project is to pencil, because it takes very long time to construct, and you don't ring the register for many years. And it's, you know, at a five a month maybe, if you're lucky, or maybe more if you have more product line. So,
okay. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, I haven't, excuse me, I haven't contributed too much to this conversation yet. My fellow commissioners have brought up some really good questions and concerns that I share, so I don't have a lot to add. I did want to ask, do you have an estimate of when you would start construction on this project? We talk about phasing and, you know, 138 days or units down the road.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously market driven, but you know, we're moving the ball on phase one for all of the plans. Our plans are in plan check for final engineering for rough grading. Our plans are in plan check for Wickard Road. We're starting the design of Wickard and Hahn for the signal. We've been working on acquiring the right-of-way for that signal. So we're spending, beyond even these entitlement dollars, significant dollars on moving the ball to getting our final engineering approved and recording our map and getting this thing to market for phase 1 through 3 at least, you know, so.
Oh, good to hear.
So timing-wise, it's, you know, assuming the market were to hold, you know, there is a lot of demand for lots currently because there is such a shortage of housing supply. And the interest rates is forcing builders to be the only game in town. So there is an appetite to move this forward. If we hit this window of this market, it could, you know, be very soon. We would record our map within the next year, and I'd say construction would start shortly thereafter on grading and all that. It takes some time to grade.
Okay, thank you.
If Lennar and Landsea and are among the 1,000 people that are watching Orlando tonight, it could be sooner than later.
Thank you for the clarification. I know the last time we met, we had concerns from the community about the cut-through road, Country Haven, so I'm in support of doing something to help reduce or remove completely the cut-through traffic there. I'm also strongly in support of anything on the south side of Garbani going to the school. The north side, as early as last year, I was making that drive to drop off at middle school and picking up. I'm very familiar with the routines and drivers and where the kids go. South side is where everything needs to be at. A mid-road crosswalk is asking for trouble. I don't think that's a good idea at all. So anything that we can do, that you can do on the south side of Garbani between your project and the school, I'm heavily in support of figuring something out with that as well.
One other question?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
You're done.
I'm done.
So, staff, is it correct? So the latest craze is you can add a ADU to a lot, right? The newest state legislation basically says it's administratively approved. But with these smaller lots, is there not enough setback that they can't add an ADU, right? Ooh, the 3800s or even the 4000.
And I think there's lot coverage requirements too. That I mean, I've looked at it before, and I think on the larger lots that exist on the other side, but on these smaller lots, I mean, you can't even really. I mean, you could put a spa back there, but getting an ADU would be very difficult. And I've looked at your standards, and staff can probably address it better. But I just don't think you'd meet the standards to do ADUs on these.
Commissioner, I would like to say that it really does depend on the specific lot, the actual building, and the type of ADU that is being requested and applied for by the applicant or future homeowner. So without any application, I can't really say for sure, but there have been changes to the ADU laws where folks can convert internally or add attached ADUs. Or they can, or add space, but it really depends on the sizing, specifically for ADUs. So without knowing exactly what that would look like, I don't think we'd want to speculate, but it is possible.
I'd say just generally though, I mean, these smaller lots are gonna have significantly less opportunities than the existing 6,000 square foot lots for ADUs.
Then the other question would be, do you see any value to making Phase 4 a gated community to kind of up the scale, shall we say, of what those are, like a gated community there? What's your experience been on that?
That was one of the items that we worked with staff on. And we've designed it such that it could be gated. We've also designed it so that it could maybe not be gated, but look like it's gated. But that really is determined by who the buyer is. If the buyer is someone who's gonna be doing seniors community, then very likely they'll request to gate it. If this is something where it's more of price point driven and they don't want to have private streets, then it maybe isn't gated.
So does staff see any value to it being gated? I mean, I know we looked at one in Audie Murphy and ended up not being gated, but I don't know if that was because staff didn't like it or because I don't think it penciled out, the developer didn't want it. I don't know. What is staff thoughts on a gated?
Like Terry said, it could go either way. Right now, it's designed with all public streets. I think it would be, right now, when we moved the park along Wickard, it could get a little bit tricky to gate it now that we've got a public park on the edge condition. So we have to look a little.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Okay, so I think we've wrapped up the section of us asking questions. I know that we have some community members that want to speak. We'll move to that section now. So what's going to happen is the clerk will call your name. You can come up to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to say what you need to say. And keep in mind that we won't be able to respond directly to you. But at the end of getting everyone a chance to speak, we can probably address some of those issues amongst ourselves and with the applicant. Okay? I'll just ask you to keep in mind all the things that the applicant has talked about, all the additional amenities and things that they're willing to do when you have your comments. So, okay, Madam Clerk, do you want to go ahead and start with the public comment section?
First up is Lisa Spetz, followed by Ken Stills.
Good evening, Planning Commission. We sat here and listened to all the accommodations they're going to accommodate us for this extra phase, and it all sounds great. But when you're in a rural area like we are, and we've got our horses, and we're trying to, like Craig, he's got several horses, and no one's going to ride through those streets and through those parks and those little bitty horse trails they're going to provide for us and go hitch their horse up at the hitching post they're going to put up. The accommodations they're trying to make for us for that extra phase, it all sounds great, but in the long run, it's 100 extra houses on an average of 4 people per house, on an average of 2 cars per home. We don't need that in this town. I call it town, I've been here 30 years, but in this city, we are coming out at the seams as it is. And Hahn Road and Wickard Road, that signal's been needing to be put in for a good 10 or 15 years. It's great that a developer is going to come in and put it in for us. Need to be put in a long time ago. But when they're talking about at 138, they're going to start constructing the signal. Well, how many more cars is that? I mean, take that times two, it's 276 more cars without a signal until they start constructing the signal, is what I understand, and I could be wrong. But just, we got to alleviate something in the city. We can't even get, if there was a natural disaster, we couldn't even get out of our homes. We can't get to Paloma. Can you imagine that corridor they're going to put in, that cut through? Do you imagine what it's going to look like during the day between MVMS and Paloma? That's going to be gridlock. And now we're going to actually, you know, build these extra 100 homes. It's not feasible. None of it's feasible right now. Unfortunately, back in 2007, we got undermined, and that became a real thing for us, that's a development that's going to go in that we can't stop now. But we could stop these 100 homes. We don't need any more homes. We need infrastructure. We need room. We need more schools. So consider that. I know we all have to ride these roads every day and go to the grocery stores that are just about empty and put our kids in schools that are overcrowded. But 100 more homes just isn't going to help.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Hello. Hello, I'm Ken Stiles. I'm at 26843 Garbani.
You don't have to say
I was flagged. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, I know you are. I know you are. Anyway, hey, you know, last time I spoke about traffic, and I focused on traffic the whole time. Traffic still is a concern of mine. I don't think that issue is going to go away. I think the light may help. But I want to speak more about our culture, what it is, where we live. I have 6 acres. Craig's got some land. You know, the Shank's got land. We all got land right there. And this, you know, phase 4 is out of place. Now, if I had a kind of an idea where it could be a good place to put it, at the town center, where it's more dense, it's smaller places, you know, it's smaller homes. The setback makes it look cheaper, not using a better word, but makes it look cheaper when you got the house in the front, and it's a narrow spot. I think Terry mentioned that it was 60 and 70 foot on phase 1, 2, and 3, and it had a curb appeal. And then phase 4 has 42 foot. I agree, it does not have the curb appeal that a 60 or 70 or 80 foot wide lot does. It's just out of place. It's not, I don't think it's for that area. Now, what I think we all that live on that area would like to see 5-acre parcels. Well, that ship's sailed, and I know it's not going to happen. And where I live, I look down on that field right now, and I'm going to miss my view, but so be it. I can't stop progress. But I can speak out against the fact that phase 4 is just out of place. It's just not for us. And I understand the economics of it for them on their part, absolutely. But it's still out of place. It is a elephant in a room. When it finally becomes there, it's going to be an elephant in a room because it's going to be so, it's going to be out of place. And I think it's wrong to allow it. So that's about all I got.
All right, thank you, Ken. Appreciate your comments.
Next up is J. Craig Gruber, followed by Dave Brown.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your time. My name's Craig Gruber. I'm one of the guys who was flagged up there along with Ken as well, and we're proud of it. And I did want to say I want to thank Terry and Brian. They've been great coming out and talking to us, and we appreciate them working on concessions with us. We do. And you guys brought up what some of those are our main concerns, Chris, like the gates and things like that. So we are all concerned about that. I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to beat a dead horse and say the same thing I said up here this spring to you guys, or the same thing I said to the city council when we were there in June. I wanted to bring up a new point that kind of hit me just 2 weeks ago, I got home from my annual trip, cowboying trip every summer to Montana, and I was riding my horse through this field. And I don't know if you guys knew it, this is interesting, but I was planning on talking about it tonight. I had no idea you were meeting on it, but 9.1 that you talked about tonight, that's the same field as what we're talking about here. That 10 acres, the two gentlemen were up here, that you guys approved their project, that's the same exact field. It's the northeast corner of that field. It's closer to it overlooks Hahn. It's on the side towards Hahn, the 215 corridor, more towards the commercial zoning side of it. That 10 acres we leased for 15 years. We used to, my buddies and I leased that, and we kept our cattle there. That's where we had our roping club there. We had our arena rope there for a lot of years. So a lot of good memories. But I got home 2 weeks ago. I'm riding my horse through the field. I come around there, and I see the sign there for you guys, for the Planning Commission. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to check this out. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I ride up and see 10 acres. They're going to do 10 homes here, and minimum square foot, 7,000 some feet. You mentioned it several times tonight. 7,000 feet, almost double what we're talking about in phase 4. So I was really pleased. I'm like, wow, these guys, they're only doing 10 homes and they can do 7,000 square foot houses. Why do we have to have 3,000 square foot plus, in the 3,000 range in the middle, further back, and more in our agricultural zone where we're all in these big, huge properties? Because this side of the field is the east side over towards the corridor. But it is that exact same field. So I was really pleasantly surprised, and I commend those two guys who were up here earlier because that was really nice to see. So the other thing that kind of hit me I wanted to think about, because I do understand these guys were saddled with the fact that putting in that $6 million water tank up on top of our hill up there. And I think some onus should be put back on EMWD. I don't know if the city, I think you guys were requested to have an EMWD representative here. I don't know why they should have to pay for 100%, because from what I can understand, the main reason they want to do these smaller houses and put more in is to make them, to make up for that $6 million. But if EMWD could cover some of that and only make them pay a quarter of that, because there's going to be other people coming in later having to pay into that, why do they have to pay it all up front? Maybe if they didn't, maybe they wouldn't have to ask for these 100 extra homes on the smaller lots, and they could do the bigger lots. But that's just an idea that I had. So once again, thank you for your time. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Craig. FYI, there's going to be 33 houses on that 10 acres. Yeah. Yeah. Right, exactly.
Next up is Dave Brown.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Good evening, Dave Brown, 31810 Country Haven Lane, as you saw earlier. Appreciate that very much.
Put your pictures on.
About 23 years at that address, and another 10 or 12 years in Menifee, for a total of about 33. So thank you again for what you do for the city. We appreciate you very much. Back in June, when we spoke with the City Council, we complimented the discussion that happened here at the Planning Commission. We complimented the developers, and I think the City Council misunderstood those compliments to mean that we wanted to come back and spend another evening with you, because that's really not what we were hoping to do, to be perfectly honest with you, as much as we respect what you do. In all honesty, there hasn't been much else presented to you tonight that wasn't presented to you the last time that you met. I know this carrot about the traffic signal, dangling that, and it's exciting to think that could come in, but we all know full well that there are other developments along Hahn Road that could fund that signal earlier. There are certainly applications in the process that could fund that much sooner than this project. So please, I'm asking you not to allow some of the small carrots that have been dangled in front of you tonight to cause you to go back on your 5-0 decision to deny or to recommend denial to the City Council. And remember, the 5 of you are joined by 5 planning commissioners at the county level, who also unanimously said this is not the right project for this community back in the early 2000s. And so 10 planning commissioners who are fully trained and invest a tremendous amount of time and who are duly appointed have all said this is the wrong development in the wrong community. And so, Commissioner Madrid, when you asked the question earlier of Brian, why would you make this, what's behind this request? He spent some time talking to you about a number of things, but what he really said is it's about money. And I would just beg of you tonight, as we have this dialogue, to consider who really benefits from a recommendation to approve this project. It's only the developers. It's not it's not your constituents who benefit, and it's not the city of Menifee who benefit. So I would ask that you just consider that when you think about what's been said tonight. All of the improvements that have been discussed tonight, the vast majority are all going to be required regardless of this request being approved or not. All of those improvements will be required in the project built as it was approved by the county that you inherited. And so please, we're just asking you to stay with your decision when you do finally have the opportunity to make that decision. I know you won't make a decision tonight. It was the right decision. Your
Mr.
5
Brown, your time
predecessors
is
at the
up.
county commission.
All right,
And
thanks, Dave.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I appreciate it very
Appreciate
much.
your comments.
Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers?
I apologize. There are no more speakers.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any?
Can I bring up one other?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So one other note that I had here was to consider making them all the minimum lot size 4,000. So if you feel the approval's not going, there's not enough to mitigate, that's something else you could throw in there. You would still get more lots, but at least they'd be 4,000 square foot lots. So that's just another thought that I have. So you wouldn't be the micro small ones.
Okay, Joe or Randy? Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I kind of got a comment. So you, the residents, already got, as Dave Brown said, you already got something that you didn't want approved. Okay, so you're extra adamant against this, right? Against this in your neighborhood. So as Commissioner Chris says, are you happy with any, like a 4,000 square foot lot, or you're not even open for that?
Sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Chair, I think you have it.
I'm sorry, we can't, we just can't go back and forth. I apologize.
Okay, sorry. All right, thank you.
The commission can vote to change those rules, but typically the 3-minute rule is consistent with what we have in the city of Menifee, even for workshops. However, the applicant does typically have more time to make their presentation and answer questions by both the public and the commission. But if that does happen, we do request that you go up to the podium so that it is heard and recorded as part of the minutes for the members of the public watching online or who may review the meeting afterward, rather than back and forth discourse between the dais and the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ty. You were going to ask a question, but we can't really have the back and forth. Keep in mind, this is just a discussion amongst all the parties involved. We're not voting on anything tonight. We're hopefully giving ideas to the developer to go back with staff to put something together. Eventually, it will come back to us. And at that time, we'll probably go through this all again. But again, we're not voting on anything tonight. This is just an idea exchange session, and we'll go from there.
If there's somebody that wants to voice more concerns, go up to the mic. Now's your glory moment. Do it.
I just kind of want to answer Mr. Madrid's question. So, we talked about it before. So back then in 2000, when it came up in the county, many of us in this room and a lot more went up there and talked in front of the Planning Commission, and they voted 5-0 in our favor that, yeah, this does not fit the neighborhood at all. It's totally out of place and incongruent and incompatible with that agricultural rural neighborhood. And then a couple months later, we all went back for when it came up to the county commissioners. We were shocked when they voted to overrule their own planning commission, and approve it. So yes, that was a big blow to us. So the way most of us are, like, we know we were saddled with that. We think there was a lot of tomfoolery that went on back then for them to get that happened. So we don't want to see any more than's already there. It's already so incongruent and incompatible with the neighborhood. Like, we don't, that's what was approved and we're stuck with that. But none of us are really want to say, hey, let's add a bunch more onto it. Like, it's just not really appeasing to us, if that makes sense, because, yeah.
All right, thanks, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Craig.
Dave, if you want to have another minute, go ahead.
I just on that point, I just want to say that that it doesn't feel like a conversation to us, and we're starting to get that feeling again, like we're going to be railroaded. We just heard 2 hours of discourse with the developers, and we got about 12 minutes collectively, and so it's frustrating. It hurts a little bit. Like I said last time I spoke, we all voted for cityhood so that we'd have the ability to come and have a conversation, and so it just feels a little disingenuous at this point.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
I would love to have a conversation about Country Haven. Because it seems like that's one of the things that it seems like the developer has convinced you that if we can put something on Country Haven to block it off, it would be helpful. I have more frontage on Country Haven than anyone on Country Haven, and I frankly think that would be a disaster to have a dead end created in front of my home, where cars would come down and be frustrated, who already use it as a place to do burnouts, to flip around and then jam back up the street and kick up more dust. So it just feels like it would be so much more helpful to have a conversation as opposed to listen to. And again, Brian and Terry have been phenomenal. These guys came to my office. We had a 2-hour meeting. It was wonderful. We had a great conversation. But we just want you to know that we believe this is the wrong project in the wrong spot, and to add more homes and more density, we think would be a huge mistake. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
We heard that. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? Anybody else on the phone? Go ahead, please come up. You got to go to the podium, please, and state your name. One second, Mr. Galloway, please. Can you give us your name, please?
Hi, my name's Kathleen Heffley. I live at 32355 Evans Road, and I'm the dirt road part of Evans Road. Just want to let you know that I hear a lot about Country Haven, but you guys are also forgetting about my section of Evans Road. Right now, when people are late going to school, they are flying in front of my house. So there's a nice little washboard going on in the dirt road part. And if you guys are gonna focus on that, I would really appreciate if you kind of look over on my part of Evans. There's about 5 houses there. Mine, Mr. Evans, and just a few others. Not a lot of us, but man, it really affects us. So just keep that in mind, and thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So can I ask a question of staff? Can we pull up the map? I don't really understand the relationship of Evans to this.
Are you talking about Evans south of Garbani? Okay, got it. Thank you.
AT, can we get a PowerPoint up, please?
Oh, so that's that going south. Okay. So
Thanks.
So I'm going to have to do this legally. Staff, I'm asking you a question. Do people use that southern Evans from Garbani going down as a thoroughfare to the school?
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that as a school route. I think Ms. So kind of showed a few different alternatives for paths. I do believe that was shown as one of them. It's all dirt south of Garbani.
So let me ask you this then. I weigh both sides of things. With or without the additional units, once Wickard Road is in, the Evans issue will go away, and the Country Glen issue will go away, will it not? Because now they have an outlet.
You have to find out first where the traffic is coming from. So you have to do a destination study to see where the cars are coming from that are traveling through that. If they're, ultimately their ending destination is at the school and they're coming from a home site further south and vice versa during pickup and drop off, that would have to take some sort of destination study to determine if that's truly where those vehicles are coming from. Will Wickard Road change traffic patterns? Of course it will. It will relieve some of the surface streets around there. People will use a paved road rather than dirt roads if it fits in their destination, their travel pattern, their point of origin and their destination. So absolutely, Wickard is going to change the dynamics of traffic patterns within this area. It will relieve some traffic on Hahn, similar to the new Holland Road overcrossing. Once that overcrossing gets built, it's going to change Hahn. Evans Road has changed recently with the development of Quartz Ranch. So there's a lot of dynamics that are changing within this area, and every new piece of infrastructure, I think the residents even indicated they want to see infrastructure. So this is how infrastructure gets built. The city only fills in gaps. We don't build long segments of roadways.
So last question is there any CIP improvement plan for Country Haven or Evans Road, these dirt sections? In the
No.
foreseeable future?
No, the corner of Evans, there are some discussions with the school district of some improvements along their frontage. But as you can see there, that Evans Road is offset through Garbani. So there is some challenges with that as well, because if you're looking at the frontage along their parcel, it starts to pull away to the east as it goes north. So it is starting to transition to line up with the intersection of the Evans and Garbani area.
I think I saw a drawing that you would reconfigure that anyway to be continuous from north to south.
Yeah, so it ultimately will realign, but that one parcel that is there, it straddles that alignment. So all of Evans north of there, this project is inside that one parcel. So it leaves a kind of a weird remnant piece.
But the short answer is there's no foreseeable CIP future improvement of Country Glen or Evans. They're probably going to.
No, Country Haven, that is a private road, so that's a little bit more difficult. Evans is on our circulation element, so that in some point in time could become a project if we work with a developer that's in that area.
Just on that note too, on Evans, our project, one of our conditions too is there's an in lieu fee for our frontage on Evans, because there is that gap there and we don't front on it. It wouldn't make sense to pave it. So there's an in lieu requirement. I think it's around $300,000 of a fee for in lieu payment of the future improvement.
Can I make a clarification to that? That is an option. The condition says that they are required to build it, but if it comes to the city and determination when they're going to build it, it could be an in lieu fee instead of building it, because it might not make sense at the time just to build a little segment of roadway. So,
thank you.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I don't want to be out of order, and I don't want to burden the Planning Commission, but I heard some public testimony here tonight about misalignment of the time given, and I would just like to offer up any time. I want to stop presenting and offer time, so if somebody has an idea of what it would take for them to see a benefit to the project, to let them have a chance to speak. Dave, we're not done with the Country Lane conversation, and I'd want to engage you before we come back to Planning Commission to try to move that further down the road to find something. It's not, like I said, it's not an easy solution, and there's not even consensus on the people along Country Lane of what they would like, but we're committed to doing that, and we don't want to take time tonight away from you to discuss what we're willing to do, but we've put it all out on the table, and I think we're moving closer. And, you know, I just want to try to work with you between now and when we come back to Planning Commission to work with that. Anybody else who wants to speak about what they'd like to see us do, I want to give them time to do that. I've already heard that you'd like to see nothing, so you don't need to repeat that, or else we'll tag you on the exhibit. But
Mr. Galloway, thank you. Mr. Galloway, thank you. I appreciate it. I wanted to address that. So, Brian, Dave, I hear you on the discussion part. I wonder if it would be feasible or even allowable to have some kind of town hall meeting where we could have a back and forth discussion. I'd preface that with saying, listening to the comments tonight, it doesn't sound like, at least from the residents that we heard from, that anything that's been offered is going to change your mind. So if we had some kind of town hall back and forth discussion, would there be any ideas?
So I can answer that.
Okay.
This is the opportunity for all of you to make your comments, concerns, have directed to the commissioners. The 3-minute rule is really just a general policy adopted by the city to help keep meetings running efficiently. If the commission would like for speakers, the residents, to have multiple opportunities to bring up their concerns, that's perfectly acceptable and encouraged in this workshop. A town hall that you're envisioning is not feasible with the quorum of the commission.
Okay.
Right? Because it has to be a publicly noticed meeting, agendized, and made available to the public with minutes. But I do encourage you, residents can definitely have meetings with the developer, but if there are any other concerns, and it seems like it's the commission's desire to have individuals go to the podium and share their comments relating to anything that's been discussed tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to give that opportunity. I think we should probably, so we stay focused, probably narrow it to, is there anything that, any ideas that you guys could bring to the developer, to us, that would make you okay with the additional units? Right now, at the moment, it feels like nothing that's been discussed is meeting that standard. So in order to stay focused, can you bring us any ideas? And you're welcome to come up to the podium. Do you have any ideas that would change your mind or allow these extra units to be built? If no, then the discussion's kind of over. But please go ahead and go to the stadium, the podium, and give us your name, and if you got something that would change your mind, let us know.
My name's Kevin Shank. I live on Country Haven. As I was sitting here listening to everybody, I was thinking about it. If that Area 4 went to a senior community only, that would limit the number of vehicles coming in and out of there. It would still be smaller lots, but it would limit the traffic through the area.
Okay.
As far as the traffic on Country Haven, the school traffic is terrible. I won't go out on my property between the hours of 2:30 and 3:30 because I'm afraid of what I'm going to do to somebody that's messing up my road. The other thing is it's not just school hours. We got the kids that do come through there during school hours and then after hours. And I'm sure they get it on Evans Road as well. They're flying up 24 hours a day. Midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, they're waking me up. So, and it's not just about the maintenance. It's, just, we moved out there to get away from this stuff. At least I did. And now it's just coming to me.
Okay.
And But the senior
Yeah,
area might be something everybody could think about.
It's an interesting idea, and that's kind of what we're getting at, right? Is a specific idea or suggestion that could move this along. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sir, can you please fill out a speaker slip in the back and get it to me? And anybody else who is going to speak tonight or has spoken already and has not given me one of these, if you could please get that to me.
Again, we're going to try to focus on ideas that might change your mind, because we know how you feel now up to this point, right?
No, I got that, and I appreciate that. Kevin, that's a great idea. I didn't think about that. The senior thing would kind of eliminate or reduce the travel. Okay, reduce the number of cars. I keep hearing about Wickard is going to alleviate the issue with Garbani. It's not. There's a whole train of people, a parade of people that come from the middle school, and I'm assuming they're going to the high school. But anyway, and there's times where I can't even get on to my own road. It's just this parade that's going by, and it's difficult. So, and I take care of the road. I'm the one that maintains the road, and so when it rains, I'm out there cleaning it up, whether they're there or not, and I work around them. And I don't even mind taking care of the road. That's part of my deal. That's why I live on a dirt road. I'm fine.
Are there any suggestions you have that you might include or ask the developer to help with that concern?
Unfortunately, I don't have a solution. Okay. I wish I did. So, and that answer no, I don't. But I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about the whole thing with Wickard is not going to alleviate the Garbani issue.
Understood. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to? Can you state your name? I forgot.
I feel like it would be disrespectful. I feel like I'd be disrespecting the chair and the commissioners and staff if I didn't come back up and say thank you for opening up the conversation a little bit more. We got to a point where we felt like in the time that the developers had, they were changing your minds, and in the 15 minutes that we had, frankly, we don't have any other things to try to change your mind. We want you to hold your ground. And
no decisions have been made tonight.
We understand. We understand. Okay. But I just want to say thank you for allowing the extra
I hear you. The reason I got into this is because I wanted to be able to have a say as well, and I don't want to take that away from anybody. It's not what I was getting at all. Ty mentioned we have thousands of people watching on YouTube right now, and it's important.
Hundreds of thousands.
What? That wasn't a joke. Why are we laughing? We want to give everybody a chance to hear and participate. Yeah. So
thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we want to recognize again the time that you give. We know it's your personal time, and we appreciate what you do for the city very much. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I mean, we did miss the U.S. National Team World Cup game. I don't know how that ended.
I'll pass on that.
That's beside the point. Anybody else want to speak tonight? Dave went out on a limb and gave you an opportunity. We're opening the door. So. Yes. Okay. All right. So we've made comments. You've made comments. The developers heard. It's in their ballpark now to put a plan together, meet with staff, consider everything that's been said, and we'll probably be back here, who knows when, relatively soon to talk about this again. So
and meet with the residents.
Again, no decisions have been made tonight. This is just a spitballing. So, all right, we're going to move on with our meeting then, right? Okay, very good. Thank you very much for speaking and having something to say and caring about your community.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
The rest of the meeting is really exciting. I don't know if you want to stay. Again, I'm not telling jokes. Why are they laughing? Community Development Director comments? You want to give us any
I don't have any
goodies?
updates. I don't have any updates tonight.
No updates tonight?
Nothing juicy, nothing. New restaurant. I don't know, something. Give us something. Nothing.
Commissioner reports on committees or activities? No, nothing? Okay, future agenda item requests? Oh, we're really moving now. Okay, It is 8:28. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.